Okay, hi guys. So this is the lecture about the three pillars. There's a reading up on Solus that you should read in conjunction while you're looking at this lecture. So the three pillars, basically, they're speaking about physical education, extracurricular sport, which is sport or activity that would be in school outside of the PE curriculum, and then sport in the community. So those three pillars. So if you have a look at that reading, it mentions those three pillars. There's an examples then of different programs that are in school, so you can just glance through them, but really it's just to give you an understanding of how these three pillars contribute to physical activity levels of young people. And now that you're working out in the community, thinking about what is the relationship to physical education, to extracurricular sport, to creating young people that are interested and motivated and engaged to lead a physically active lifestyle. So this lecture is online, so just to start off with, so this is a line that was taken from a subject inspection of physical education. So an exemplary approach is taken to promoting a physically active culture amongst students through the structures and supports for an extensive extracurricular sport and physical activity programme. So highlighting that the PE inspector, they weren't just looking at the subject of physical education, they were looking at the structures and the support structures around that. So actually the activity that was happening outside of the physical education classroom. So even in terms of subject inspection, that was one of the aspects that the PE inspector was commenting on. So then just to go on to the next one. So it said the three pillars, and so these are just pedagogical principles which we would think about when we're teaching our classes in physical education, but also these are the same things that can apply when you're working out with your physical activity groups. I know some of you are working with older adults, some of you are working with special needs, some of you are working with youth, but these same things will apply. So presence, so a rapport, so thinking about, have you built a rapport with your group? Managerial skills, managers and strategies reduce off-task and disruptive behaviour. So maybe some of you can reflect on this about things that might be disruptive in your group, even regardless of the age. And then instructional skills or behaviour, so including your demonstrations, explanations, checking for understanding, active supervision and feedback. So just to bear these in mind when you're planning your sessions. So the learning outcome from the module outline is describe the existing pillars of youth sport, physical education, extracurricular sport and sport outside school, the relationship between them and the implications for physical education teachers and youth sport providers. And then the success criteria, so you should be able to distinguish the similarities and differences between the school physical education curriculum, extracurricular and youth sport, and then consider the expectations of the role of the physical education teacher across all three, or the shared expectations. So in terms of the physical education teacher within PE in school, extracurricular and then sport outside the school. So the first task, there are some tasks, and just put this on a Word document, you can upload it to Solus. So what tensions do you read between the three pillars, and what are the shared expectations of the role of the physical education teacher across all three? So this is based on the reading that you've done, and just 200 words approximately. So what are the first things that kind of strike you when you're thinking about after reading that chapter? And there's definitely parts at the beginning which are more probably relevant. So again, thinking about you and your own role and your shared expectations across the three of those pillars. So we can see this was the Children's Sport Participation Physical Activities Study, the CISPA study, and this was conducted in 2009, 2010, and there's more recently been one done in 2018. So this was back in 2010, and just showing the relationship between the pillars. So we can see we have basketball, soccer, athletics, Gaelic hockey, all the sports, physical education, extracurricular and extra school. And what it's showing here is that PE was catered for in basketball, but then if students want to participate in that outside in extracurricular, only 12% was provided, and then after school 7%. So as we see, like swimming, only 15% of schools provided swimming in physical education. Extracurricular, 4% of students participated, and then extra school 15%. So they were matching, they were on par. Whereas we can see with hockey, so it was catered for in physical education, extracurricular only 4%, it was available to them, and then extra school 3%. So athletics 43% participate in physical education, extracurricular only 8% were participating, and after school 8% as well. And you can look at those and just see kind of, you know, where there's similarities, where there's differences, and the relationship between the three, and make your own kind of judgment. So what are your initial thoughts when you look at that? So yeah. This is a figure which was also from that study, so it's showing about the participation of post-primary schools who never participate in extracurricular sport. So that's extracurricular, so in the school, and we can see 2009 is the pink, 2005 is the blue. So we can see that actually it is so let's say I would always look probably similar to yourselves when you're thinking about PE in school, especially in Ireland. In 5th and 6th year, we can see that the amount of students who don't participate in extracurricular sport increase as they go through the school system. So in 6th year or going to college, let's say, that kind of, so we can see that it is like 30 to 35%. That's in 2005, but actually in 2009 there was improvement to 25%. So whilst there was, it's worrying, I suppose, that, and I know this isn't probably a new fact, but that as students go through school and go through their schooling system, they tend to drop out of physical activity, and this is an example. But there was a small improvement from 2005 to 2009, which is good. The next figure is the proportion of post-primary students who never participate in extra school sports by year in school. So that's like outside, so I mean, you're doing your Gaelic or your volleyball or your swimming or whatever it is. So that's nothing got to do with school, it's outside. So we can see 2005 is the blue and 2009. So this actually, again, we can see that it's actually kind of, you know, there is a percentage in first year who aren't participating outside of school, but it is increasing as they go through. So almost like 45% or above 45% in 2009 are not participating in extra school sports. So that's actually, that's gotten worse. Whereas in 2005, there was about 20% which weren't participating. So that's kind of like the other one, it had improved as the years have gone on in terms of extracurricular sport, and this had actually worsened in terms of community sport. So I don't know, is that something got to do with the leaving certificate as they go on, exams pressure, again, so just thinking about that in these statistics. So what observations do you make when you compare the data in table 1.1 and table 1.2 across post-primary males and females? So there's a table that's in that chapter, and just have a look at that, and you can spend 30 seconds. You don't have to write anything on this, but just to look at this. And so some of the observations you can see is majority of activities undertaken in physical education are not accessed, available to the same extent as extra school or extracurricular activities. And we can compare that back to what we looked at in the CISPA study, that table back in the beginning of the lecture. And then activities that are as popular in extra school or extracurricular to that of physical education are Gaelic, hurling, weight training, swimming, martial arts, for males, and dance, swimming, Gaelic and camogie. So have a look at that table, because that's relating to just to develop your understanding about the relationship between these three pillars. Then if we think about the aims of our physical education curricula, so the general aim of the junior cycle, so first, second, third years, which all of our students are going to participate in, is to contribute to the preparation of the student for a life of autonomous well-being. So yes, we have, now this has changed, not changed, but we do have the short course, and we do have well-being curriculum. But again, that's what no matter what curriculum the teachers are using in junior cycle, that's what the aim of junior cycle is. The aim of physical education in senior cycle, so that's when we're thinking about our framework, so the non-examinable, is to support learners' confident, enjoyable and informed participation in physical activity now and in the future. And again, thinking about that, we had a discussion in one of the, just thinking about that, sorry, in terms of now, based on what we've seen in terms of the participation levels are decreasing as students get into 5th and 6th year senior cycle. Definitely that framework is extremely important, and thinking about contemporary issues, even yourselves as teachers, and social media and all the different things now that young people are dealing with and you as teachers have to be aware of. And then the aim of Leaving Certificate Physical Education is to develop learners' ability to become informed, skilled, self-directed and reflective performers in physical education and physical activity now and in the future. So there's a little bit more in this. So to become informed, skilled, self-directed and reflective performers. And if you look at the curriculum, there is a lot of activities, and the learning outcomes are designed so that we can develop our learners to be these things. This was a study that was done in Rhine in 2013, and this is the mean time spent in physical activity level. And blue is physical education, extracurricular is red, and green is extra school. So we can see moderate to vigorous physical activity, the least amount of time that was spent in MVPA was in physical education. The most amount of time which was spent sitting was in physical education, and standing was, a lot of time also in physical education. Whereas we can see in extracurricular sports, that's the most time they were active, walking, and the least time that they were standing, but they were lying down a bit, so I don't know what that is. And then if we think about the similarities and difference, so the mean time spent in each lesson content, again, if we focus on the blue, physical education, so management time was the highest knowledge, which would make sense because, it is a school subject skill, and then the least amount of time was in the game, whereas in extra school, most amount of time was spent in the game, fitness, and also some management. So management is obviously important to a lot of them, but this is actually, when we think about where students or young people are most active, we can see that it's actually an extra school sport, or that community sport, from this study. And then the mean time spent in teacher or coach interactions, so in class physical education 60%, but then we can see in extra school that there was actually a lot of interaction, so that's in your community sport or your out of school sport. And in extracurricular there was a bit out of class, so there was nothing, and then in neither. So this was kind of also highlighting that there was a lot of times when there was no or very little interactions with the physical education teacher or an extracurricular sport with the coach. So that's the amount of time spent in teacher and coach interactions. So the conclusion from this study was little or no evidence that a relationship is occurring between each of these three pillars. Out of class promotion of physical activity is more or less non-existent. The lack of a relationship can have a detrimental effect on student participation in physical activity and a life of autonomous well-being. So if this is found that these three were not connected, and that this lack of a relationship between them could actually have a worrying effect on student participation. So we saw the results from the CISPA study in 2009, which I also said that was just carried out, or they've just been reported. The results from 2018 was done, but it was 2019. So what I want you to do is look at the Sport Ireland infographics from the CISPA 2018 study on SOLAS. What observations do you make after reading through the statistics? So there are just infographics, just look through them. There's one on the Republic of Ireland, there's one on physical activity levels, physical education, community sport and extracurricular sport. And just look at focus probably on the post-primary statistics, but just what strikes you about this. And look even at the 2000, and just go back to even what I provided in this from the 2010 study or 2009, and see what are the statistics telling us? Like, what has happened over the past 8 years or 9 years, or has anything happened? This is just an example of the directors of physical activity, which you can see, that in America they have started this kind of a role in terms of the PE teachers is outside of the classroom. Beyond delivering PE lessons, directors of physical activity, you can read through that, coordinate program on facilitation of physical activity opportunities for schools throughout the day, encourage teachers of classroom subjects to infuse physical activity breaks, and create opportunities for the school's teaching and support staff and members. So what do you think about, just thinking about yourself, do you think this would be an appropriate kind of role, and thinking about would it be a way that we could improve the relationship to three pillars or not? Is that in the remit of a physical education teacher? This is also a document which was from 2012, which is from the government, which is called Get Active, Physical Education, Sport and Physical Activity for Young People. So it's a shared initiative. So this was prior to the physical activity plan, but the National Physical Activity Plan, but we can see one of the outcomes. Young people have the confidence to get involved in physical education, sport and physical activity. So in class, in co-curricular activities and in the community. So this was after that CISPA study, and this was what the learning outcomes were. So looking at this, have we achieved this? Have we not? Then the final lecture task is, what do you think the role of the physical education teacher should or could play in bringing the three pillars together in Ireland? So that's 300 words approximately. So again, just thinking about that, this is kind of similar probably to the first one, but thinking about you, so let's say together in Ireland, and now from your experience working in the community, can you see what type of a role that the physical education teacher in Ireland could or should play in bringing the three pillars together, and bearing in mind thinking about those statistics from the CISPA study? So by the end of this, there's your success criteria. You should be able to distinguish the similarities and differences between the three pillars and consider the shared expectations of the role of the physical education teacher across all three. There's our pedagogical principles again, just to remind you of those. Thanks.